Welcome to the Religious Studies Podcast, the deep dive curated just for you.
And I had it just for you.
A quick note before we start, though.
A quick note.
This deep dive, like all of our deep dives, is AI generated,
Right.
but it's all been verified by expert Bastian Freiburg.
That's right.
So
For accuracy.
you can trust that we're bringing you reliable insights,
Exactly.
just presented in a way that's hopefully a bit more engaging
Are engaging for sure.
than your average academic paper.
Yeah, we're tackling a fascinating question today.
We are.
How do individuals engage with religion throughout their lives? We're going to dig into the interplay of meaning and belonging,
Right.
drawing on some insightful academic research.
Yeah, and it's a topic that's especially relevant for
Okay.
those of you in the field,
Yeah,
whether you're students or seasoned scholars.
absolutely. And it's not just about the beliefs themselves,
Right.
but how those beliefs are lived and experienced within a social context.
It's lived religion. Yeah. So let's start by unpacking these two sort of core concepts,
Okay.
meaning making and belonging.
Meaning making and belonging.
Two sides of the same coin, maybe.
You can think of it this way.
Yeah.
Religion often provides a framework for understanding the world and our place in it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the meaning-making piece.
Okay.
And then religious groups offer a sense of community and shared identity,
Okay.
which is where belonging comes in.
Right. It's like a two-sided coin.
Yeah.
You have the individual searching for meaning,
Right.
and you have the group providing a sense of connection and
Exactly.
shared purpose.
Exactly. And the source material uses a great analogy to illustrate this.
Okay.
A community of memory.
Okay. I'm intrigued.
It means that religious groups act as repositories of shared stories, rituals, and traditions.
Okay.
They connect individuals to a larger historical narrative, a chain of experiences and interpretations that stretches back through time.
So it's like joining a living library of meaning, where you can tap into this rich tradition that helps you make sense of your own life.
Exactly, and it's this connection to something larger than oneself
Mhm.
that often gives religion its power.
Yeah. But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting.
Tell me more.
Maintaining this community of memory becomes increasingly challenging in modern society.
Oh, yeah, no, so,
With its rapid pace of change, mobility, pluralism,
right.
and shifting family structures.
Oh, yeah, like trying to hold on to a shared story while everyone's writing their own chapters.
Exact.
That warp speed.
Yeah.
So how does this dynamic play out in the lives of individuals? Let's start at the beginning with childhood.
Think about your own childhood for a moment.
Okay.
What were your earliest experiences with religion?
Well, my family wasn't particularly religious, so...
Even so, you were still exposed to certain cultural narratives, holidays,
Of course.
or moral frameworks that shaped your worldview.
That's true. I guess I never really thought about it that way.
And for many people, childhood is where the seeds of religious identity are planted.
Mm-hmm.
The family acts as the primary religious group, shaping a child's understanding of meaning and belonging.
The source material highlights some fascinating examples of this.
Yeah.
Like the Mexican-American home altar, where religion is interwoven into everyday life. Or that study linking children's God images to their parents' qualities.
Right, their parents' attributes.
It really shows how influential the family environment is.
Yes.
Even if it's not explicitly religious.
Absolutely. Children don't just absorb abstract concepts.
Yeah.
They experience religion through the relationships and rituals that shape their world.
Mhm.
They see how their parents or caregivers interact with the sacred, and that shapes their own understanding.
It's like learning by osmosis, soaking up the beliefs and practices that surround you.
Exactly, but it's not just the family, of course.
Right.
The community also plays a crucial role, especially for those embedded in ethnic communities.
Mhm.
It can either reinforce or challenge religious identities, depending on the context.
Like having multiple layers of influence shaping your sense of self and your place in the world.
Exactly.
The source mentions a fascinating study of Hindu, Muslim, and Sikh children in London
Yes.
who maintained their distinct religious identities while also participating in each other's traditions.
Yes. That's a great example of how complex and fluid
Yeah.
religious identities can be, especially in multicultural societies.
It's not always a clear-cut either-or situation.
Right.
It can be more about finding a balance between different influences.
Exactly. But as we move into adolescence, things start to shift again.
Right? Adolescence is all about change.
Yeah.
Questioning and forging your own sense of identity.
Right.
It's often when people start to grapple with the religious beliefs
Yeah.
they inherited from childhood.
Think back to your own adolescence.
I think it's pretty common to push back against the beliefs you grew up with. As you're trying to figure out who you are, it's like testing the boundaries.
Right.
Seeing if those beliefs still resonate with your own experiences.
That's a great way to put it.
Thanks.
And the source material draws some interesting parallels between traditional rites of passage
Okay.
and modern religious experiences like confirmation or bar mitzvah.
Oh, right. They both mark a transition to adulthood.
Yeah.
But in modern society, that transition is often much more ambiguous and drawn out.
Exactly. And that ambiguity can lead to some interesting outcomes.
Okay.
The source mentions an anecdote about a 13-year-old boy who, after his confirmation, tried to offer suggestions to the church elders.
I'm guessing they weren't exactly thrilled about that.
They found it amusing that he felt empowered to offer his opinions.
Right.
It highlights how ritual adulthood doesn't always translate to social adulthood,
Yeah.
especially in a society where the markers of adulthood are so fluid.
It makes sense. It's like going through the motions of a ritual, but not really feeling
Yeah.
like you fully stepped into that new role yet.
Exactly, and it makes you wonder, what does it even mean to be an adult in modern society?
That's a question for another deep dive, perhaps.
Yeah, perhaps.
But for now, let's stick with the topic of religious identity.
Okay.
How does this all play out as we enter adulthood, specifically with marriage and starting a family?
Well, religion's influence extends far beyond just formal rules and norms.
Okay.
It can shape our values, relationships, and even choices related to marriage, family, and child rearing.
Right. It's not just about attending services or following rituals.
Right.
It's about how those beliefs inform our decisions and actions in everyday life.
Exactly. And the source material delves into how religion can impact marital commitment,
Okay.
attitudes toward children, and even the meaning of parenthood.
Okay.
There's even a fascinating comparison of the contrasting worldviews of pro-life and pro-choice activists.
That's a powerful example of how deeply religion can shape our values and choices,
Absolutely.
even on issues as complex and intensely personal as reproductive rights.
Absolutely. It reminds us that these aren't just abstract debates.
Right.
They're rooted in deeply held beliefs that impact people's lives in profound ways.
It's a reminder that we need to approach these conversations with sensitivity and understanding,
I agree.
recognizing that people are coming from very different perspectives.
And while the source touches upon the connection between religion and sexuality,
Okay.
it acknowledges that this is a vast and underexplored area.
Another deep dive waiting to happen.
Yet another deep dive.
But for now, let's shift gears and talk about middle age.
Okay, middle age.
It's interesting because unlike adolescence, there aren't really any clear rites of passage
There aren't.
for middle age.
No.
It's a stage marked by ambiguity, both socially
Yeah.
and in terms of how individuals experience it.
So how does this lack of clear markers impact people's religious lives?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Well, the source describes it as a potential period of identity crisis
Okay.
for both men and women.
Okay.
Roles shift, priorities change, and there's often a sense of reevaluation. For women, their focus might shift towards spirituality as their traditional role as mother becomes less central.
Like a search for meaning beyond the structures
Yeah.
that define their earlier years.
Exactly. And for men, this period can be marked by a reevaluation of career goals, relationships,
Okay.
and a desire for deeper connections.
It sounds like a lot of internal and external change to navigate.
It is. And because our society doesn't really offer any rituals or clear markers
Right.
for this transition, it
Yeah.
can be a challenging period to make sense of.
So let's talk about old age.
Yeah.
Is it true what people say that you become more religious as you get closer to death?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
It's more nuanced than that. The source challenges that simple assumption
Okay.
and instead focuses on the social context of old age.
Right.
As people age, they're often shifted into the private sphere away from the world of work and public life. Their social roles change,
Right.
and so do their expressions of religiosity.
So their focus might shift to relationships, spirituality, and finding meaning in the face of declining health and social status.
Precisely, the source even shares a poignant quote from an elderly woman
Okay.
who started questioning her beliefs about the afterlife after her husband died.
Wow.
It highlights how even long-held beliefs can be re-examined
Yeah.
and transformed as we navigate the complexities of aging and mortality.
It's a reminder that religious journeys are rarely static.
Right.
They're constantly evolving alongside our life experiences.
Absolutely. And while Western cultures often isolate the elderly, other societies, like in India,
yeah?
offer specific spiritual roles for older adults.
That's interesting.
This highlights the diversity in how different cultures approach aging and spirituality.
But before we move on,
Right.
I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier.
Okay.
The secularization of time in modern society.
The secularization of time. Yeah, you see, traditional religions often view time as cyclical or sacred,
Okay.
connecting individual lives to a larger cosmic narrative. Events have a deeper meaning because they're part of a larger story.
Yeah.
But in modern society, time is often perceived as linear and profane. It just passes.
Okay.
And that passage is associated with decay and the eventual end of life.
It's almost as if we've lost that sense of connection to something larger than ourselves.
In a way, yes, and this has implications for how we experience aging and dying.
Okay.
Without that sacred dimension, old age can feel like a decline rather than a meaningful stage of life.
Mm-hmm.
And dying on time becomes more difficult because we've medicalized and secularized the process.
It's like we're trying to deny the natural cycle of life and death clinging to youth and productivity.
That's a good way to put it, and this brings us to an interesting paradox.
Okay.
While modern society often downplays the significance of old age,
Right.
it simultaneously places immense value on economic roles.
It's all about productivity and consumerism, right?
Precisely. So when individuals reach retirement age,
Right.
they're often stripped of their valued status in both work and consumer roles. They're seen as less productive and less able to participate in the consumer economy.
It's like being pushed to the margins of a society that prizes youth and economic power
Exactly.
above all else.
And while the concept of retirement is supposed to offer freedom and relaxation,
Right.
it can also lead to feelings of isolation and worthlessness.
Oh, yeah.
For those who have defined themselves by their work for so long.
It's like losing a part of your identity, your sense of purpose.
Exactly. And this is where religion can play a powerful role.
Okay.
It can offer a sense of meaning and belonging
Yeah.
that transcends the limitations of our secularized society.
It can provide solace, community, and a sense of purpose that extends beyond the confines of work and consumerism.
Precisely. It's like a counter-narrative to the dominant cultural story,
Yeah.
one that affirms the inherent value and dignity of each individual regardless of their age or productivity.
That's a really powerful insight.
It is.
It makes you think about the different ways we find meaning and purpose throughout our lives.
Yeah.
But let's move on to another fascinating aspect of individual religious experience.
Conversion?
Conversion.
Yeah, when I think of conversion, images of dramatic life-altering experiences come to mind.
Yeah.
Is that an accurate portrayal?
It can be, but it's important to understand that conversion is a multifaceted process
Okay.
that goes beyond simple change in religious affiliation.
Okay.
It's a transformation of self and meaning system.
So it's not just about switching churches.
Exactly. It's about a profound shift in how someone sees themselves and the world.
Okay, so it's deeper than just changing your label. It's about a fundamental shift in your worldview.
You got it.
Okay.
The source provides a great example of this with a person who converted from Mormonism to Soka Gakkai,
Okay.
a Japanese form of Buddhism.
Okay. Two very different religious traditions.
Very different.
What insights did that conversion offer?
Well, it highlights how conversion experiences are diverse and can involve varying degrees of personal transformation,
So some conversions are more about reaffirming existing beliefs.
while others involve a radical shift in worldview and identity.
Exactly.
What about the reasons behind conversions?
Well, that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
And we need to be careful about falling into simplistic explanations.
Like the whole brainwashing myth.
Yes, the source material debunks that harmful metaphor,
Okay.
explaining how it misrepresents the complex social and psychological factors involved in conversion. It's not as if people are suddenly taken over by some outside force.
Right. It's a much more nuanced process than that.
Exactly. The source draws a fascinating parallel between the current anti-cult sentiment
Okay.
and the 19th century anti-Mason movement.
Oh, wow. Tell me more about that.
Both movements fueled fears about groups that were seen as demanding unwavering allegiance
Okay.
and potentially subversive to societal norms.
Right.
It highlights how anxieties about religious deviance are often rooted in broader social and historical contexts.
It's like we're always looking for someone to blame
Right.
for disrupting the status quo, especially when it comes to religion.
Exactly.
So if we want to understand conversion, we need to move beyond those simplistic narratives
Right.
and examine the process itself.
You got it. So how do you think conversion actually unfolds?
Well, from what we've discussed so far, it seems like it's a gradual process,
Okay.
a journey rather than a sudden event.
You're absolutely right. The source describes it as a gradual process with multiple stages.
Okay.
Predisposition, interaction, and symbolization.
Okay, let's break those down.
Okay.
What does it mean to be predisposed to conversion?
It means that certain life experiences, crises, or a general search for meaning can make someone more open to exploring new belief systems.
Like someone going through a major life transition,
Yes.
a personal loss, or even a period of questioning and doubt.
Exactly. The source even mentions the concept of a seeker, someone who is actively looking for a more fulfilling belief system. They're already primed for a potential shift in their worldview.
That makes sense. So they're searching for something, but they haven't necessarily found it yet. Then what happens?
That's where the next stage comes in. Interaction.
Meaning?
This is when individuals encounter members of a religious group, forming relationships and being exposed to their beliefs and practices.
It's like gradually being drawn into a new social network and absorbing a new way of seeing the world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The source emphasizes the importance of group support and how those new relationships can become increasingly central as the individual starts to withdraw from their previous social circles.
It's like finding a new sense of belonging, a community that validates your evolving beliefs.
Precisely. And that brings us to the final stage, symbolization.
Okay, so this is where those dramatic conversion moments come in.
They can, but symbolization is about ritualizing the transformation that has already been taking place. It's about making a public declaration of your new identity.
Like a baptism.
Yes, or a public testimony, a confession of faith. Or any ritual that marks a significant turning point in the conversion process.
But these rituals aren't the cause of conversion, right?
Yeah. Exactly. They're more like the culmination of a process that has been unfolding over time. They serve as powerful symbols of the individual's changed worldview and sense of self.
It's like the outward expression of an inward transformation.
Precisely, but the journey doesn't end there. Conversion is just the beginning. The real test is maintaining that commitment over time.
So how do religious groups foster that sense of commitment? What are the mechanisms at play? Let's dive into that next time.
Let's dive into that next time. Picking up where we left off, let's explore how religious groups foster that sense of commitment.
Okay, you mentioned some mechanisms at play.
Right. The source highlights two key mechanisms: withdrawal from competing allegiances and attachment to the group.
Okay, I think I'm following.
Think about it this way. When someone converts to a new religion, they're often stepping into a whole new world with a different set of values, beliefs, and practices.
It's like joining a new culture almost.
Exactly. And to solidify that commitment, there's often a process of withdrawing from things that might conflict with those new beliefs.
So it's about creating some distance between your old life and your new one.
Exactly. It can involve physical separation, like joining a commune or moving to a new community.
Right, I've heard of cases like that.
But it can also be more about creating mental boundaries.
Like avoiding certain activities, media, or social circles that might challenge your newfound faith.
Precisely. The source mentions examples like homeschooling, joining religious social organizations instead of secular ones, and even controlling the type of information members are exposed to.
It's like building a protective bubble around your beliefs.
In a way, yes. And this brings us to the second mechanism, attachment.
Okay, tell me more about that.
This is all about strengthening the bonds between the individual and the group. It's about creating a sense of belonging, reinforcing shared values, and making the group an emotional, fulfilling experience.
So it's not just about believing the same things, but also about feeling connected to the people who share those beliefs.
Exactly. It can involve things like shared activities, rituals, communal meals, and even public testimonies of faith. These shared experiences create a sense of solidarity and strengthen those emotional bonds.
It's like building a web of connections that reinforces your commitment to the group.
The source material even draws a comparison to the Ephrata cloister, a religious community founded in Pennsylvania in the 18th century.
Oh, I've heard of them. They were known for their strict lifestyle, weren't they?
Yes, they lived a very communal life with strict rules and expectations. It's a fascinating example of a group that utilized these commitment mechanisms in a very intentional and deliberate way.
So they were kind of an extreme example of this dynamic.
In a way, yes, they highlight how groups can create a very strong sense of commitment through a combination of withdrawal and attachment mechanisms.
It makes you wonder what happens when that commitment starts to weaken. Is there a reverse process for disengagement?
Absolutely. Just as conversion is a process, so too is disengagement.
Okay.
It typically involves a gradual shift in self and meaning system, often marked by a breakdown in what sociologists call the plausibility structure.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that term.
Okay.
What does plausibility structure mean?
Think of it as the network of beliefs, experiences, and social supports
Okay.
that make a particular worldview seem believable and meaningful.
So it's like the scaffolding that holds your belief system together.
Exactly. And when that scaffolding starts to weaken,
Yeah.
whether due to internal doubts, external challenges, or changes in one's social context,
Okay.
it can lead to a process of disengagement.
So the things that once made your beliefs seem solid and unquestionable start to crumble.
Precisely. The source highlights factors like reduced isolation from the outside world,
Great.
competing commitments, disillusionment with the group's leadership,
Right.
or even just a growing sense of incongruence between one's own beliefs and the teachings of the group.
It's like the cracks start to show, and the individual begins to question their commitment.
Exactly. And this can lead to a variety of responses, from seeking advice from other believers to trying to reaffirm their beliefs,
Okay.
to ultimately deciding to leave the group.
So it's not always a sudden or dramatic break. It can be a slow and painful process.
You got it. And the source points out that the disengagement process, much like conversion,
Yeah.
can be emotionally intense, especially for those who have invested a lot of themselves in their religious identity.
Right, because it's not just about changing your beliefs. It's about leaving behind a community,
Exactly.
a way of life, a part of yourself.
Exactly. And the source shares a poignant quote from an ex-Hasid who described feeling emptiness and loneliness after leaving the community.
That must have been incredibly difficult to lose that sense of belonging and shared identity.
It is, and it highlights the profound impact that religious communities can have on our lives,
Yeah.
both for better and for worse.
So disengagement isn't just an intellectual process, it's an emotional and social one as well.
Precisely. And while the source focuses on individual disengagement,
Okay.
it also mentions collective forms of disengagement, like internal reform movements, collective defections, and even schisms.
So sometimes it's not just about individuals leaving, but entire groups breaking away.
Exactly. It highlights how dynamic and fluid religious landscapes can be,
Yeah.
with both individuals and groups constantly negotiating their beliefs and allegiances.
That's a fascinating insight.
It is.
It reminds us that religion isn't static or monolithic. It's constantly evolving
Right.
and adapting to the changing social landscape.
Absolutely. And understanding these dynamics of engagement and disengagement is crucial.
Yeah.
For anyone interested in studying religion, whether it's from a sociological, historical, or theological perspective.
It helps us to see religion not just as a set of beliefs,
Right.
but as a lived experience, a journey that unfolds within a complex web of social relationships and cultural influences.
You got it. And it's a journey that's full of surprises, challenges, and transformations.
Speaking of surprises and challenges, I want to circle back to the concept of brainwashing
Okay.
and how it relates to disengagement. The source mentions that this metaphor is particularly problematic
Yes.
when it comes to interpreting people's decisions to leave a religious group.
Absolutely. The brainwashing narrative suggests that converts are incapable of making rational choices
Okay.
and need to be rescued from their beliefs.
Right.
It justifies coercive practices like deprogramming and ignores the agency of individuals who choose to leave a religious group.
So it's essentially another form of control disguised as liberation.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And the source emphasizes that sociological studies of disengagement debunk that simplistic narrative.
Okay.
They show that most people, even those involved in intensely demanding groups, leave voluntarily. Their decisions are based on a complex interplay of factors,
Yeah.
including personal experiences, changing beliefs, and evolving social networks.
It's a reminder that we need to respect people's choices even when we don't agree with them.
Absolutely. And that includes respecting their decision to leave a religious group.
Right.
Regardless of our own beliefs or biases, we need to recognize that people's religious journeys are their own.
Yeah.
And we should approach those journeys with empathy and understanding.
Well said. This has been such a thought-provoking exploration
It has.
of the dynamics of religious engagement and disengagement.
Yes.
But I'm curious, what are some of the key takeaways from all of this? What's
Yeah.
the so what for our listeners,
Yeah.
especially those in the field of religious studies?
That's a great question. One crucial takeaway is that religion is deeply personal,
Okay.
but also profoundly shaped by social forces.
Okay.
Our beliefs, practices, and sense of belonging are influenced by our families, communities, and even the larger societal context in
Yeah.
which we live.
So it's not just about what we believe in our heads,
Right.
but how those beliefs are lived and experienced in the world.
Precisely. And this makes the individual's journey through belief and belonging complex and fascinating.
Yeah.
There are no easy answers, no one-size-fits-all explanations
Right.
for why people choose to embrace, maintain, or abandon certain religious traditions.
It's all about individual stories unfolding within larger social narratives.
Exactly, and understanding those intertwined narratives is essential for anyone interested in the study of religion.
Yeah.
We need to go beyond simplistic assumptions and engage with the messy, nuanced realities
Right.
of how people actually experience faith.
So as we delve deeper into the world of religious studies, we need to keep in mind that we're not just dealing with abstract concepts,
Yeah.
but with the lives and experiences of real people.
Absolutely. And those experiences are often filled with both beauty and struggle, joy and heartbreak,
Yeah.
certainty and doubt. It's the human story in all its complexity refracted through the lens of faith.
Beautifully put. It's a reminder that studying religion is about more than just analyzing texts and doctrines.
Right.
It's about understanding the human heart.
I couldn't agree more so as we continue this exploration.
Yeah.
Let's bring that sense of empathy and curiosity to the table.
Mm-hmm.
Let's try to see the world through the eyes of others,
Yeah.
even when their beliefs and experiences differ from our own.
That's a great reminder. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Okay.
do you have any final thoughts for our listeners? Something to ponder as we move into the next segment?
I do, given how modern society, with its emphasis on individualism, often undermines traditional sources of meaning and belonging.
Yeah.
I think it's crucial to consider this. How do you see the future of religion in a world where both individualism and the search for meaning are so prominent?
Wow. That's a big question. It makes you think about the role of religion
Yeah,
in a rapidly changing world.
exactly. Will traditional religious institutions adapt to these changes? Will new forms of spirituality emerge?
Yeah,
These are questions worth pondering, wouldn't you say?
absolutely. It's a question that will continue to shape how individuals navigate the complex landscape of religion and belief in the years to come.
Indeed, and with the rise of technology and artificial intelligence,
Yeah.
we might see even more shifts in how religious communities are formed and maintained.
Lots to think about, and we encourage you to share your own thoughts and questions with us as we continue this exploration.
We're always eager to hear from our listeners, but for now, let's take a moment to reflect on these ideas before we delve into the next part of our deep dive.
Picking up where we left off, we've been having this fascinating discussion about how individuals engage with religion throughout their lives.
Oh, yeah.
From, those early influences in childhood to navigating those shifts
Right.
in belief and belonging as we mature.
As we mature, exactly. And as we've explored, these individual journeys are
Yeah.
intricately woven into the larger tapestry of religious communities.
Right.
And their evolution, it's a dynamic interplay
Hmm.
between personal faith and social structures.
That's a great point. We often focus on individual beliefs,
Right.
but we can't forget the broader context in which those beliefs take root and flourish.
Exactly. And one of the key concepts for understanding this interplay is religious conversion.
Mm-hmm.
As we've discussed, it's not just about a sudden change of heart,
Right.
but a gradual process of transformation.
Right. We talked about how it's more like a journey, a process of resocialization.
Exactly. The source material describes it as a gradual shift where individuals are introduced to a new way of seeing the world
Yeah.
and eventually adopt a new sense of self that aligns with that worldview.
It's like learning a new language, a new way of understanding and interpreting life's experiences.
That's a great analogy. And remember those 3 key stages we discussed earlier?
Yes.
Predisposition, interaction, and symbolization.
Yes, I remember. Let's revisit those stages in a bit more detail.
Okay.
What does it mean to be predisposed to conversion?
Think of it as a state of openness
Okay.
to new ideas and experiences,
Yeah.
often brought about by personal crises.
Hmm.
A search for meaning or dissatisfaction with one's current beliefs.
Like someone going through a major life transition, a spiritual crisis, or maybe they're just feeling a bit lost
Exactly.
and searching for something more.
They might be actively searching for answers, or perhaps just experiencing a vague sense of unease.
Yeah.
Or longing for something more fulfilling.
So they're primed for a potential shift in their worldview,
Yes,
but they haven't necessarily found a new direction yet.
precisely. And that's where interaction comes in.
Okay.
This is when individuals encounter members of a religious group, engage with their beliefs and practices, and start to form relationships within that community.
So it's like stepping into a new world, a new social network that offers a different perspective on life.
Exactly. And as those relationships deepen, individuals gradually begin to internalize the group's worldview and adopt their beliefs and practices as their own.
So it's not just about intellectual agreement, but also about feeling a sense of belonging and connection.
Absolutely. It's both intellectual and emotional. And finally, there's the stage of symbolization.
Right. This is where those powerful rituals and ceremonies come into play.
Exactly. Symbolization is about ritualizing the transformation that has already taken place.
Yeah.
It's about making a public declaration of one's new identity and commitment to the group.
So it's like a culmination of the conversion process.
Yeah.
A way of marking that transition, both for the individual and the community.
Precisely. It can involve rituals like baptism, confession of faith, public testimony, or any other act that signifies the individual's changed worldview and sense of belonging. It's like a way of sealing the deal, both internally and externally.
But even after someone goes through this process of conversion, their journey isn't over, is it?
Not at all. Maintaining that commitment over time requires ongoing effort and engagement.
Right. It's not a one-time event.
Right.
But an ongoing process of navigating the complexities of faith and belonging.
Absolutely. And that brings us to the concept of commitment mechanisms, the strategies that religious groups use to foster loyalty and attachment among their members.
We've discussed some of these, like withdrawing from competing allegiances and fostering a strong sense of attachment to the group. What other strategies are at play?
Well, think about what motivates people to stay committed to any group or cause.
Okay.
It's often about more than just shared beliefs.
Yeah.
It's about feeling a sense of purpose, belonging and meaning.
So it's about creating a whole ecosystem of support and reinforcement.
Exactly. And religious groups are masters at this.
Okay.
They encourage sacrifice, promote a sense of awe and mystery, and foster a shared sense of purpose and mission.
It's like building a multi-layered foundation for commitment, one that goes beyond intellectual assent to a set of beliefs.
Precisely. It's about creating an environment where individuals feel a deep sense of connection, purpose, and belonging. But we also have to acknowledge that not everyone who converts to a religious tradition remains committed for life.
Right. That brings us to the other side of the coin, disengagement.
Exactly. And just as there are stages of conversion, there are also stages of disengagement.
Okay.
Individuals might experience doubt, disillusionment, or a growing sense of conflict between their own beliefs and the teachings of the group.
It's like that feeling of growing apart, of no longer fitting in.
Precisely. And this can lead to a variety of responses. From seeking internal reform, to defecting from the group, to ultimately abandoning the tradition altogether.
So it's not always a sudden or dramatic break. It can be a gradual process of drifting away.
Absolutely. And understanding the factors that contribute to disengagement is just as important as understanding the factors that promote conversion and commitment.
Right.
It gives us a more complete picture of that dynamic interplay between individuals and religious communities.
This has been such an insightful exploration of the individual's journey through belief and belonging.
It has been a fascinating discussion.
As we wrap up this deep dive, do you have any final thoughts for our listeners, especially those in the field of religious studies?
I do. The study of religion requires empathy, nuance, and a willingness to embrace complexity. We need to resist the temptation to oversimplify religious experience or judge individuals based on their beliefs or choices.
So it's about approaching the study of religion with an open mind and a compassionate heart.
Precisely. We need to listen to people's stories, understand their motivations, and recognize the diversity of religious experience. And perhaps most importantly, we need to acknowledge that our own perspectives and biases inevitably shape how we interpret and make sense of the world of faith.
It's a reminder that we're all on a journey of understanding.
We are.
Both individually and collectively.
Indeed. And with that, we conclude our deep dive into the fascinating and ever-evolving world of religious studies.
This has been such a rich and thought-provoking conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us.
It's been my pleasure.
And to all our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey of exploration. We encourage you to continue pondering these ideas, asking questions, and engaging in thoughtful dialogue about the role of religion in our lives and in the world around us. Until next time, keep those minds curious and keep searching for meaning.